Hi, I'm Stella O'Malley, a psychotherapist in Ireland.
And I'm Sasha Ayad, an adolescent therapist in the United States.
And this is Gender, a Wider Lens, a podcast dedicated to the shifting concepts around gender in our contemporary culture.
Through in-depth interviews, personal stories, and psychological exploration, we seek to open up the discourse around this hot-button issue.
Join us as we look at gender from a wider lens.
Hey, Stella.
How's it going, Sasha? How are you?
I'm well. I was so excited today to talk to April Hutchinson, powerlifter and remarkable lady. It was super fun for me, especially because I lift weights, and it was really cool to talk to her. She was amazing.
Yeah, and the two of you speak about the weights that she lifts, and all I could kind of look on and agog. But clearly she's phenomenal, and she started at a very late age, but she's an extraordinary woman.
Yeah. So, April, as you'll hear, tells us about how she got into powerlifting really as part of recovery. She ended up in rehab at death's door. She tells us the story, and she basically got herself out of this really dire situation by starting to lift during COVID. And then within a short period of time, she went on to hold records. This woman's strength is unbelievable. And so we kind of contextualize that a bit, because I do think if an average person is listening to this, you throw around these numbers like 300 pounds, 500 pounds, 200 kilograms, and people may not just understand how unbelievably remarkable that is, especially in the short period of time after she started lifting.
Yeah, I was one of those people listening going, what? Most people went on Netflix and COVID. She became some sort of world champion lifter.
Yeah.
But that's not all. Then her life has taken extraordinary swerve. So she's one of those people who seems to have packed in 4 lives into one. And so she was really in a very low place. And alcohol addiction had really taken over. And then COVID came along and she started weightlifting, and then kind of shot to kind of extraordinary status. And then trans kind of issues came in the door.
Yeah. She, as she'll tell us, she befriended this person who she didn't realize was a male to female trans person who was competing against the women. And she felt this kind of big conflict. And as she talks about, part of recovery from alcohol addiction is telling the truth. And so she was faced with this discovery that this male was in the women's division, and she felt a conviction to tell the truth about it. And then, we don't want to give too much away, but then pretty much all hell breaks loose. She ends up kind of having to fight the federation. She gets suspended, and we'll kind of let you hear it from her. But it is remarkable, and she's just so brave and so courageous and powerful. And for anyone who's interested, we also play a video of one of my recent deadlifts, and she critiques it, and that's in the bonus content. So you'll have to check us out there. And my strength coach, who's an amazing coach named Michael Wolf, he submitted a couple of questions for her from another kind of strength professional. So she answers his questions, and it was just fascinating to talk with her.
And may I also say, fascinating not just for weightlifters. I have no interest in weightlifting, and I found her fascinating. Absolutely. Just the overcoming of adversity and just ballsy. It's really just a great fun episode, I thought.
Yeah. Principled lady for sure.
Yeah.
All right. We hope you enjoy this conversation. We want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, GenSpect and Therapy First. GenSpect is an international organization committed to fostering a healthy approach to sex and gender. The team and members of GenSpect strive to promote high-quality, evidence-based care for gender nonconforming individuals. GenSpect is pleased to offer a non-medicalized approach to gender with their recently published Gender Framework, and they continue to hold conferences around the world. Visit genspect.org to learn more.
Therapy First is a non-profit worldwide professional association of mental health providers who view psychotherapy as the appropriate first-line treatment for gender dysphoria. Therapy First supports psychotherapists working with gender dysphoric youth and young adults, and offers public education on mental health and psychotherapy. Visit therapyfirst.org to learn more.
Now back to the show. Hi, Stella, and welcome, April. We're glad to have you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're absolutely thrilled to have you. We've been following your story. It has a lot of twists and turns. And we're really pleased to have somebody who's been through so much and who's been so kind of strong in the face of a lot of kind of obstacles. So,
yeah, you've had all kinds of really complicated things happen. You're a power lifter. You're part of a Canadian Federation of Powerlifting, and because you discovered and exposed a lifter who was actually biologically male, kind of a whole lot of crazy and tragic things ensued. So for anyone who's not familiar with your story, can you just kind of run us through the brief details of it? And then we'd love to hear a little bit more about some other aspects of this.
Yeah, so I don't know if you want the whole backstory of how I got into powerlifting or not.
Yeah, we'd love that.
Yeah, so I guess just kind of briefly, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I actually have 5 years sobriety coming up this Saturday, actually.
Wow.
And
well done.
so I actually got sober right before COVID hit in 2019, September 2018. And as a way of getting to help me with my sobriety, I got into powerlifting as a way to keep fit, keep my mind focused. And so I trained during COVID in my friend's garage because all the gyms were shut down. And I just trained my little butt off and in this little garage, and there was no competitions to be had. And during that time, I got very strong. And when I came out of this little garage, I actually discovered that I qualified for nationals for the Canadian team, Team Canada, basically. And I won gold medal, which led me to the world stage. And then I got 4th place at Worlds. And it was just a big whirlwind. I basically got a North American deadlift holder. I still have the North American deadlift record to this date. And it was just a big blessing. And during that time when I was training during COVID, I met a friend online on Facebook by the name of Ann Andrus.
Can I just point something out? It's quite remarkable to go from just, I've never power lifted in my life, I'm using this as kind of like a mental health coping strategy, to like discovering that you just are blowing past the competition. I mean, did you know, for example, just as a younger person, that you were strong? Like when it's time to move, you pick up your friend's couch and it's no problem. Like, did you know that you had the genetic capacity to be so exceptional at this sport?
No, I don't know if people know how old I am. So I'm actually not young. So I'm actually 48 years old. So I actually did all of it in my early 40s. So I actually, growing up, I actually started drinking at a very young age, at the age of 12. I suffered a lot of trauma, sexual abuse at a very young age, but I was always an athlete. I was always into sports. So, and I also have very good genes. My whole family were athletes growing up. So I was always, even though I was an alcoholic, I always tried to play sports. So I took care of myself. But so I guess when I got out of rehab, now going back to my drinking, when I went into rehab, I was on death's door. I basically had to make a decision. My doctor gave me a year to live. I tried to commit suicide. I didn't succeed. I was in the ICU unit on a breathing tube. I didn't succeed at my suicide attempt. I woke up with a breathing tube down my throat and I said, you know what? Obviously, I didn't succeed at that. God wants me to live. So, April, you have to make a decision. So I put myself into rehab. And that's when I had to say, you know what? I got to do some work here. I got to do the best I can. And then I went through the 30 days at rehab and then I came out and I put more work in. And that's when I just busted my butt and I just trained my little tush off because I wanted to live. It wasn't even for the fact that I loved to powerlift. I just wanted to do anything just to live, right?
Jeez.
And powerlifting was my thing to strive. I looked forward to it every day. just to give me some purpose. To me, that was God saying, there's your purpose every day, right? So, and you know what? I think going down the road, I'm going to emphasize this more so I can motivate people. I just had so much crap come my way with this man coming into my sport that's been my focus. But I really would like to be a motivator. I know it just motivates people, right? But
yeah.
But anyways, so during that time, I met a friend online by the name of Ann Andrus, and we would talk about powerlifting. We were friends, and I'll say he. I didn't know it was a he at the time, but he would ask me questions. He really looked up to me and said, "You're a really great lifter. Can you give me some tips?" And so we would share just common, interests and stuff like that. So, and then one day
at the time, April, you thought that Ann Andrus was another female powerlifter when you first struck up this friendship, right?
Yes, because Ann was registered in the female category, and Ann was winning gold medals, and Ann went by the name Ann, and me just looked like maybe, I guess I thought Ann was, I wasn't assuming maybe Ann was a lesbian. I didn't know. I can't tell by online, and I had never met Ann. And again, just assuming because Ann was in the female category. And then we were talking about Laura Hubbard going to the Olympics. And I said to Ann, "Oh, I can't believe they're letting a male go to the Olympics. That's completely unfair." And Ann said, "Well, I was born male." And I said, "What?" I said, "I didn't know that. You never told me." I said, "You just kind of refer to yourself as a she-boy. How was I supposed to know that?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, I transitioned after the age of 20. And I was like, "Well, that even makes it worse." I said, I'm going to speak up about this. I actually said, I'm going to raise hell. Both of those my words. And if you keep competing, I'm going to tell the CPU, and blocked and deleted me. So I couldn't have any further conversation with Ann after that. So
and the CPU is the Canadian Powerlifting Union, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just curious, about your thought process, because you've described this conversation with Ann. You had been talking. You knew that Ann was winning, gold medals and stuff. What went through your mind when Ann was like, "Oh, I'm a male. I was, transitioned after 20." What did you think?
Well, I just thought it was completely unfair. I mean, Ann had been waiting for at least a couple of years. And I do know that, for example, my friend Kristen that came out later on, there was 2 female lifters that are my friends that competed against Ann that later came out and said, "I competed against Ann. I had no idea that Ann was a male, and I lost out on a podium gold medal because of that." And they actually reached out and said, "Thank you for speaking up," and they're devastated. The one girl still has anxiety and depression and suffering from it and she hasn't competed since then. I say this over and over again. What female is going to, let alone little girls, are going to keep competing if they just keep losing to men or males or boys, right? So this is what's happening. So that's why when I found this out, I actually wrote my federation a 2-page letter outlining the mental anguish and the physical harms, because there are physical harms, because, I'm in a tested federation where we can't take banned substances. Now you're going to have females that are going to take performance enhancing drugs. Girls are going to take steroids. They're going to get caught cheating. They're going to do anything they can to beat this man and throw their integrity aside and fairness on their part just so they can beat this man to go to worlds and stuff. All these, overtraining, depression. Athletes have a way higher risk of suicide from not getting a gold medal. It's just all these things and they ignored me. They just ignored my letter completely.
Yeah.
So.
I want to touch on something that I think the average person who's not athletic or not into strength training, and like different sports are different. For example, I could imagine that perhaps like a ping pong championship, if it's between a male and a female, there might not be like a strength differential that makes a huge difference. But there are certain sports where unequivocally being a biological male versus a biological female makes a massive difference. And sometimes when I read articles of like people trying to defend the idea of like inclusion of trans women in sports, you can tell by the way they're talking about it that they've never performed an athletic feat like in their life. It's all hypothetical, philosophical. It's about like, intersex people. And it's like, whoa, this is not true. So for people who don't understand, April, can you just outline some examples of like what is the record for male deadlift versus female deadlift? And just keeping in mind for our audience, these are the strongest people in the world of their class. Like give us a ballpark. You don't have to know the record just off the top of your head, but like give us a ballpark of like what is the strongest female deadlift versus the strongest male deadlift?
Well, for example, like if you take Anne, so Anne, this is an example right here. So I'm
Okay.
40, I'm 48. I mean, even when I started, I was in my mid 40s, but Anne is actually 41. So we're both master lifters. I have not been striving to hit the 500 deadlift for the longest time. And basically right now is ranked for the women. Okay. So Anne would be, if Anne competed with the men right now, Anne would rank 1,600 plus 1,600 if he competed in his weight class and age.
Meaning that 1,600 other individuals are ahead of him in strength.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
keep going.
To infinity, yeah.
More. Okay.
And is he number one in the females now?
She ranks number one in the world for the women, for the world masters. And I think he's probably number 7 for all ages of all. Now we're talking of all time, all years, all time. And walks in and starts like his first starting deadlift is like 515. His highest deadlift is 582.
Which is not that high for a male, like who's at this level.
That's not high, but a male's deadlift, the strongest man's deadlift is like 1,000 something now. I think that's the strongest man's, right? So it's just, and I mean, men, I mean, Anne's almost probably 6 feet tall. Anne will have bigger, even just hand size to grip that bar with, right? The fast twitch fibers, men have more fast twitch fibers. I mean, even with bench press, like Anne makes fun of women for being weak on bench press. Well, women are not designed to do bench press. We're not designed to do that. Men have a 70% more advantage in strength sports alone. Even when we saw that boxing, someone said, oh, well, men are just stronger in boxing. Do you know how much? 300% stronger punch, 300%, let alone not just 10%, 300% stronger. So it's, yeah.
And I actually want to touch on this comment that Anne made on social media about the bench press, because I thought that was so remarkable, so cruel, and so manipulative. I mean, male upper body strength is just so much more powerful than female upper body strength. So again, just to give our audience a perspective, tell me about some of the strongest female bench press. And the bench press is like a chest movement, essentially. What is a strong female bench press versus like a strong male bench press?
Oh, well, I mean, if a female, like we're talking different weight classes too, right? So if you take Anne's weight class, I mean, there are some females, who have been training for a very, very long time. Again, if you take the heavier weight classes, you have to train for such a long, long time though. And if you have shorter arms, yes, you can be in the 300, 360s. I think Anne's is in the 3-somethings, but no higher than that, right? But
what about a male? Yeah.
Oh, the men's would be in the 5-somethings, and that it's just unbelievable, right? A world of difference. Again, women's like muscle fibers are, well, we're not built that way. We're just not
Yeah.
built. That's something, if a woman does have a high bench, you would call her like a bench tech. You call her a bench tech because that's all she would do would be practicing bench. Like, you're not going to be amazing at a bench and then be amazing at that. There's just no way.
Yeah.
That's all you would do is train in the bench. Yeah.
Isn't Jen Thompson someone
Yeah.
that's a name that I think, yeah, she's
Yep.
like an amazing bencher. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you write this 2-page letter to your federation in Canada, and what happens after that?
So I wrote them and I didn't get a reply at all from them. No, thank you very much. So I went to social media and I started just posting stuff to make the public aware of what was going on. Just stuff like Save Women's Sports. I actually had reached out to, I think it was Beth from the States. Beth Sussler is her last name. She was very active with the Save Women's Sports in the States with the powerlifter that was going on. I think Larry Mayo from the USA Powerlifting is in the court right now with, I can't forget the powerlifter from Minnesota. It's at the Supreme Court right now going through, but she's actually on a kind of a no speak ban right now about it. I haven't been keeping updated with it, but she was one of the first people that had been speaking out. And obviously I heard about the whole Leah Thomas thing. So I was kind of trying to find out, like, hey, where can I get some help here? So I started posting stuff online, Save Women's Sports. And so I posted something in my stories about that. And I got a letter from the Canadian Powerlifting Union saying, you can't say that it's hate speech. And I got a code of ethics violation. So I was like, oh, that's weird. I didn't say anything hateful, though. So I then reached out to Linda Blade with ICFS, Riley Gaines, Icons, Marcy Smith, and then they all came in and helped me. We were chatting, and then we sent a letter to the ICFS and Linda Blade and Icons. They all, and I actually sent a letter to the Canadian Powerlifting Union, basically outlining what they're doing was wrong and allowing men into the category. They ignored that letter. And so Anne actually competed in August at the regionals and broke 3 of the Alberta powerlifting records and took 3 records. So I went on to the Piers Morgan show, talked about it in August of 2023, and I referred to Anne as a 6-foot man because I was describing Anne to Piers. And about a week after that, I got a letter stating that I was suspended for 2 years. And so I then contracted a lawyer, Lisa Bildy, a wonderful human rights lawyer in Canada. And I basically had to appeal my suspension, and which I did. And with the help of Rebel News, they funded all my legal fees. And I reduced my suspension to a year through a third-party agency which was a woke agency here in Canada. So, and I mean, it's just been a grueling 2 years. It's just been one thing after another. I should never have been suspended. If I was being reduced, it should have been reduced to 0, not just 1 year. But I feel like they chose 1 year just to do a middle of the road split to make everyone happy. But, and since then, I've basically been speaking up, but my suspension ends November 6th. And I've decided, as you know, I'm not going back November 6th. I've chosen not to. So
Can I ask, had you not gotten suspended, had all this stuff not happened, were you like slotted to go and perform really well in competitions? Like, where were you headed? I mean, obviously we don't have a crystal ball, right? Like, you can't know that, but had you not been suspended, what would you have been doing in the sport?
Well, the path that I was going down, I mean, I went to Worlds. I got fourth place at my first Worlds, which is unheard of. I mean,
Yeah.
like you train for a couple of years before you even go to your first Worlds. I still hold the North American deadlift record. And my plan actually going forward, if I did go back in November, was to go to the Commonwealth Games. I would have taken records. I know that I would have gone back and I probably would have gone to Worlds. I would have gone to Commonwealth. I turned 50 in 2026. I wanted to sweep up and take all the records at all the major competitions, I mean, if things change, well, I mean, because I did speak up, they did change the policy at an international and national level. So I'm very happy about that, the International Federation does agree with me. They do not want men going through. They very much want to get into the Olympics. And they said, we do not want this happening. And especially they saw what happened at the Olympics and they said, there's no way. They actually want to make their policy even stricter. And the president is on my side. And he said, thank you so much for bringing this to my attention, that there's actually men in the Canadian Powerlifting Union women's category. So he actually put his foot down and told the Canadian Powerlifting Union, I want testosterone monitoring and I want medical records submitted if there's any men trying to get through to nationals and internationals. So it's very, very strict. It's not perfect, but it's because Anne actually tried to get through to Worlds and he got denied. They're like, nope, you're not getting through. But men are now still allowed to compete at a local level. And this is where I'm not happy, because this is the grassroots. And this is where it's very important that little boys and girls learn the differences between, boys and girls. But also, this is where little girls are going to want to strive to keep competing and get their love for the sport. And this is where it all starts. And this is why I've resigned. I will not participate anymore until they change that, because I don't feel good going back and standing by and watching that. It makes me sick to my stomach. And I don't care if anyone else doesn't boycott or stand back, but I refuse to be part of that until I won't go back until they change that. So
yeah, you're incredibly admirable. I think what you're circling on there is such an important point, which is the kind of the invisible harm that we don't see, which is all the people who don't compete, all the girls who back away because a boy beat them, all the people who are watching thinking, I've lost heart. That it's like the chilling effect with therapists. We can't quantify it, but anybody who's in the industry are saying it's huge. It's a huge impact this has. It ripples out so much further than people realize. So when people say it's only a tiny number, like Sasha was saying earlier, they don't actually know what they're talking about, because it's only people in the industry say, no, this has a very strong effect that ripples out right through. It just crucifies the grassroots. They back out of the sport. And that's, I think, such an important point. I think you've been so brilliant in showing people how to speak up. There's something about when somebody speaks up that other people realize it can be done. And you've done it so well. And I know, and we all know, and I'd love you to speak a little bit about it, the people who haven't had the heart to speak up. I honestly think the mental anguish that happens to people who don't speak up is pretty devastating. There's something about the integrity of speaking up I think is very good for people's, even if it's really difficult and really arduous, but it's actually good for your psyche.
Yeah, and that's what. So it's kind of like for me, I was at a crossroads, and I think everyone kind of, when I found out about Anne, I sat with it for a little bit. It's not like I got on the computer that night and wrote my federation. I sat with it. And, and it's a very important part of my sobriety too, because I felt like I was lying to myself. And I know if I hold secrets, it's like the secrets will keep you sick. And I knew that my integrity, I was like, well, I could just lie about it because I really want that gold medal at Worlds. Like, who cares? I'm not a selfish person. And it means more to me, my integrity and being truthful, than any gold medal in the world. And I guess, and I have two nieces that I want to have fair sport going down the road, right? So, and I guess the advice that I try to give to people is, like, I'm just so shocked that, when I hear about this, like, there's a 50-year-old swimmer here in Ontario that identifies, I don't know if he identifies as a 13-year-old girl, but he likes to swim on the girls' team, and he shares the locker room with these girls. And I'm like, why are these fathers, first of all, why are the mothers standing around, just looking around, doing nothing? Like, and I've been to sports with Rebel News or David Menzies, and the police are kicking us off off the fields. And I said to these parents, what are you going to lose by banding arms and standing in front of that change room, and the cops come up to you and say, leave? And you say, well, no, I'm protecting my little girl. Like, are those police officers really going to take you away in handcuffs? Like, what do you think the news is going to do? Put that on the 6 o'clock news. Oh, parents protecting their little girls from a full-grown man going in the locker room. They're not going to put that in the news. Like,
You're brilliant.
Everyone's so afraid, like, to offend, to hurt people's feelings. They're not looking at the safety aspects. They're not looking at that little girl that's sitting there hurting inside because she didn't get that blue ribbon because that boy kicked her butt again and again and again at these track and field meets. And she goes home and goes, Mommy, guess what? I don't want to play sports. I just need to draw again. I like to draw or do this and that because I keep getting looked at these events. And that's what's happening. Like, take Vancouver School Board just put something out yesterday saying grades kindergarten to grade 3, we're all just going to do the track and field meets together as one group. Well, guess what? The boys are going to beat the girls, and the girls are never going to want to compete anymore in track and fields because they're all going to be blended together. They're all going to get participation awards. Like, nothing's going to happen to you if you use your voice. Like, look what I've done the last 3 years. Did I lose my job? No. I work for the city. I haven't lost my job. People write me all the time and say, I support you. I have nothing but support. I've had nothing but love and support. I don't get hate mail. I even check my spam account. I don't get hateful emails. I really don't.
I think that's such a good point because to some degree, for example, being suspended for 2 years, that is a newsworthy piece of your story, right? So I understand that, like, when people Google April Hutchinson, like, I was trying to Google a bunch of your lifts in the preparation for today, and I could find more stories about the controversy than your actual lifting videos. So it's like, it's funny how, certain pieces of shocking news, they flood the online space or whatever, and it can give this false perception that, like, poor April Hutchinson has been, like, so ostracized and demonized by her federation. Like, we might imagine that your life has been so destroyed by this. But what you're saying is so important because you're like, no, people thank me all the time. Like, people really support what I've done. And obviously it sucks that you were suspended and you had to go appeal it or whatever. Like, that is unfortunate. But when more people speak up and tell the truth, there's so much positive that comes from that sometimes in our, like, shock jock news cycle that can get lost. And I think it's really important for people to know, like, if you have something on your conscience, speak out about it because you're not the only one.
No, exactly. And I've never spewed hate. I'm literally just telling the truth. And there's ways of doing it. I think that's the message, right? Is that I'm actually grateful that the suspension happened because it actually gave me a voice and it gave me a platform. And sure, if people do Google me and see, I'm actually happy that when I die, that's left. There's my legacy. I actually got suspended because that's badass. That's awesome. I was a Canadian rebel, and I love it. And I did that. And I hope to God that more people speak up. Everyone speaking up and saying, hey, F Trudeau, get Trudeau out. Well, you don't like Trudeau. If you don't like what's going on, then start doing something. Then use your voice at these sporting events. If you don't like what they're teaching your kids in school, then you go and you tell the teachers, you ask, you go up to your kids, our teacher, and say, hey, what are your beliefs? What are you teaching my child? Like, start using your voice. Don't stand around, because if you stand around, you're agreeing with it. And I mean, there's not, again, it goes back to just, I don't want to hurt people's feelings. Well, by doing that, you're causing more hurt. And there's a way of doing things. I have never been hateful. I mean, I still can love all people, but there's still wrong and right, and they're still saying what's true. Like me calling out someone saying you're a man, to me, that's not hateful. I'm just saying, I'm sorry. You can't control my speech. I'm still taking biology class. I know what's an XY, what's an XX. Like, I'm not being hateful. It's just, I'm sorry you seek validation, but you only get that from yourself. It's not my job to give you validation. It's just, it's just the way it is. And you can't take away fair sports and safety from girls. And even though I'm not powerlifting anymore, I'm still going to be a huge advocate to the day I die. So I don't care if I'm 100 years old, I'll still be outspoken. I'll still help as many athletes and teams as I can.
This is such a fascinating conversation. Listeners often tell us they feel frustrated by the lack of nuance around this issue, and they feel afraid to speak their minds.
And they ask us how they can help to bring more clarity to this difficult topic at their workplace, in their kids' schools, or with their own friends and family. Well, here are 3 things you can do right now.
1. Follow. Wherever you're listening to this, take a second to click like, follow, or subscribe.
2. Share. Send this podcast to anyone who you think might appreciate it.
3. Join. Support our efforts by becoming a paid Substack supporter. Go to widerlenspod.com now to subscribe.
Now back to the discussion.
May I ask about, the kind of the general chat among women athletes these days? Has it changed a lot, let's say, since Laurel Hubbard or since what happened with you and Riley Gaines? How much is it a feature of conversation? How prominent is it? Or is it only in the kind of extremities that people are talking about it?
Well, I mean, in Canada, I mean, it's not so, I mean, in the States, it's way different. I mean, there's so many sports teams that are getting just dominated by men. I mean, I'm in talks with icons regularly with Marshy Smith, and it just seems it's just run rampant there, even in Australia, right? But I do know like a fair amount of the powerlifters in the Canadian Powerlifting Union. I mean, we talk about it. I mean, I do think, I mean, I get a lot of behind the scene messages of people talking about it. Again, a lot of athletes do come to me. They want me to be the voice, to be the one to kind of speak for them, which I don't mind. A lot of women don't have the courage. A lot of people don't say they think, oh, I'm going to get fired, or, they feel like they're going to get attacked, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's people are talking about it, right? And I think a lot of the time too, I think I'm just kind of like, just wait, because I do feel that with a change of government, I don't think much is going to change until Pierre does come in power. And to be honest, nothing can really change that much until they repeal Bill C-16. Danielle Smith has been the only leader in Canada that has implemented legislation in Alberta, right? Change. She actually was the one to stand up and change to protect women's sports. I think that comes out in October, finally. So, British Columbia, their election comes out. Well, it comes in a couple of weeks, right? John Rustad of the Conservative Party, he tried to pass a bill in April. Myself and Linda Blade were there. guests, and he wanted to implement a bill to protect little girls and women's sports. And the NDP government didn't even allow it to go to first reading. They shut it down. So that's the NDP government for you right there. So that's why it's very important to vote conservative, because they're all on the same page for protecting women and girls.
I find it really strange, like as a person who myself, my views have always been more on the liberal side. I find it very strange that like I tend to think of like historically, not so much anymore, and maybe it's different in Canada, but that liberals are people who think about the underdog and make sure that everything's super fair for everybody. And what's happened is really different now. I mean, there's a way that the progressives and the liberals, both in Canada and the US, have to like put complete blinders on to like stick with whatever their bizarre progressive quote unquote policies are. And it's shocking to hear you say this, that like there's a bill trying to protect girls in sports. That sounds like the most obvious basic thing that everyone would agree on, but it's so weird. Like it's such a distorted version of reality. I don't know, like I don't know what your political history looks like, but I find this to be the most weird 180 that I've ever seen. Maybe I just didn't understand the right versus left philosophy before, but I just don't really understand how this has happened.
Well, it's because the NDP look at, obviously, I mean, the NDP look at transgenders as a minority. And this is how they're treating them, as a severe minority, which is crazy because they are literally at the top of the hierarchy. They literally have more rights than anyone right now. And so that's, and it's, so they shot it down. It didn't even go to first reading when it was implemented. And the bill itself was, John Ross said, it was a really great bill, much like Danielle Smith was. They just wanted a male-only category, a female-only category, and a co-ed. So that way, it was very fair, so that way people could basically what an open category. So that way, we just to have a female only, you know what I mean? So and they just wouldn't even look at it. So so hopefully, I mean, they win the election in October and that can be passed. I think that will be one of the first things. And I do know Pierre Poilievre has been asked, what do you think? And he does want believes that, men should not be in women's sports or spaces. So, I mean, to me, it's just a no-brainer, right? So, but no, I say this all the time. Guess who my biggest enemy is in this fight is liberal women.
Always liberal women.
Oh, that's my biggest enemy. 80% of the time is liberal women, and my biggest fight and my biggest enemy, and who fights me and who goes crazy on me is the liberal women. It's like, he wants to let them into our space in women. So
I don't know if there's any merit to this, but something I think a lot about, because I also, I do strength training and I've learned a lot about myself through the process. And I've learned a lot about what it takes to do something very physically difficult when you don't think you can, and to like, even, this is a little like woo-woo, but even having to hold your body in a really strong position and like keep pushing against something difficult. Like this is something I'm just learning now with like my coach and all this stuff. But I wonder if there's something very like overly flexible and weak about certain people whose number one priority is to be nice rather than stand up for what is right, even if it might be difficult for other people or if it might cause pain to you. Like, I think a lot about how what we do with our physical body translates into our psychological selves. And do you find that, I mean, are there a lot of, you said some of your biggest enemies are liberal women. Can I ask, are these women who are current competitors and athletes? Or are you talking more about like lawyers or like writers or academics? Like, who are these liberal women? And do you see where I'm going with this weird line of questioning? Therapists.
So I don't. Okay, so I have a theory but I don't want any limit out there. I mean, I've talked to a few people. Actually, a lot of men agree with me on this. But a lot of women do as well. So, and this is something I learned in rehab too. So before I went into rehab, I had like zero self-respect. I had zero self-love. And that was something I learned about myself. So when I got my self-respect back, and the way I get self-respect is from taking care of myself, eating healthy, taking care of my body, doing good things for other people, like volunteer work. I also volunteer for like Special Olympics, also training, doing powerlifting, being faithful, like just doing good things, like being faithful to my partner. It could be like doing a good job at work, praying every day, doing my good things, right? For myself. I get my validation from myself too, right? So I don't seek it from other people. So, and then you do you work out, you eat healthy. It's like the look good, feel good. You get it back in return, right? So a lot of these liberal women, I'm going to say liberal women, I find they all kind of have the same kind of look. They're usually between like 40 and 60. They're usually a little bit, I'm going to use the word grumpy. They might not take care of themselves. Some of them might even have a pink streak in their hair. Who knows? But a lot of them never have self-love. They don't have self-respect. And they seek and they virtue signal. And they grasp on to something, an ideology. A lot of them will have those icons of their thing, or they latch on to Black Lives Matter, they latch on to this, they latch on to that, but they seek something outside of themselves to give them that, you know what, I'm important, I feel like I'm helping they'll have even pronouns in their name, but they're obviously not transitioning, or they just feel like I'm helping the world by putting pronouns in my name, and that's where they seek, women before. And I used to do this when I was younger. I got my validation from sleeping with men. Like I got that validation from actually sleeping around with men when I was younger, which obviously we all know you're not getting your self-esteem and your self-respect from doing that. But women do that. So these women, these older women are actually doing this these liberal women are like, you know what? I'm going to jump on this bandwagon. And I'm going to help this cause, which is, hey, let's jump on this bandwagon of let's let these men into our spaces. Let's jump on this, I need this ideology graspers. It doesn't have to be this idea, but usually it is. You know what I mean? And meanwhile, it's because I call it, they belong to the land of misfits. They've never belonged to a group, or they've never belong to something, right? And they just kind of band together, and this is what they do. And it's a fancy word for virtue signaling, basically.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is there's no kind of self-worth coming from the inside, so they look to outside slogans or movements to feel good. That's what you're kind of implying here.
Exactly. If they had self-love and self-worth, I do not believe they would be so hell-bent on really working hard. Any woman would not be so hell-bent, unless maybe they have a transitioning or a trans child, maybe, or someone in the family that it affects. What woman would welcome a man into their bathroom or say it's okay to have that predator go into that prison or that shelter? No, there's no way. Yeah.
And if you were to, off the top of your head, obviously you don't know this, but if you were to guess how many of the, to Sasha's point, how many of the weightlifters, the female weightlifters, would nod along to this? Do you think? What sort of percentage? And how many would actually agree with you if they didn't have to come out?
Oh, I would say well over half. I'd say maybe 70%. I think that goes for the men too. I think
would agree with you.
Oh, yeah, men and women. And it's funny, I wish the Canadian Powerlifting Union, the board, you think they would have put a survey out
Yeah,
instead of this woke board. And one of the board members actually has a kid, like a queer child or transitioning child, which go
of
figure.
course.
Uh, you think they would have put a survey out to say, hey, what do the members want, instead of a board of men, one woman or two women making the decisions for us? And we are paying members, by the way. So you think paying members would have to have a say in that, but no, and they just went and made their own decisions. So yeah, it's just, yeah.
That's something we see over and over in the world of like all this gender stuff, is like if an organization or a federation puts out some sort of a statement around something, it gives the illusion that there's this like complete consensus amongst everyone in the field, but
Yeah.
actually that's not the case at all. You have a couple of really aggressive, maybe ideological people who push for a certain policy, but on the ground, either we don't know what people really think, or there would be huge dissent and nobody's really asking like people within the sport or people within that field. So yeah, I think what you're saying is really important.
Yeah. Well, British Columbia did do, I mean, and British Columbia is pretty left, like kind of their politics, and the British Columbia Association for Powerlifting, they put out a survey, and I think it was like 90%. When I was like, wow, they're actually going to put a survey out. And I think anything I've seen online for Twitter asking athletes, it's always been almost 100%. I mean, come on, it's a no brainer. And I actually get so many messages from even just men saying like, it is, it's not even affecting them. They're like, this is just horrible. Like, what's happening to you guys? Like, so, I mean, if the men are saying it, of course the women don't want it. I mean, let alone competing, we don't want to share our like locker rooms with like the two competitors just alone in the powerlifting union are unhinged. They've already been threatening female competitors. So we don't feel comfortable sharing it with them.
Can I ask you, you talked earlier in the show about how, I mean, I didn't realize how dire your situation was with alcoholism. Like I'd heard you share a little bit about that, but I mean, you were fighting off death. I mean, as you described it, how do you think that prepared you for this kind of process of like fighting with the powerlifting federations and unions and like trying to stand up for what's right? Do you think there's a relationship between what you went through with sobriety and what you're doing now?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's funny. I don't talk a lot. I should really, now that I'm not powerlifting, I really should just start a vlog or put something out there, because I really, really want to make my whole life about helping addicts and alcoholics, because I don't talk a lot about how bad it was. I don't have that picture of me with like the bottle on my face or my hooked up to the tubes. I don't have that before and after. People just kind of think of me as like, oh, April, she just always looked like an athlete. And so I don't talk a lot. It was very emotional for me too, right? Because, it caused my family a lot of pain to put them through that. So, my mom passed away from cancer when I was 25, and, so it's just me and my dad, and, I put my dad through that, obviously, right? And, so it definitely gave me a fighting spirit. My mom was also a fighter through cancer. And I think when you know what's right in your heart, and, I just, like I said, integrity just means way more to me in my life. It's like principles over personalities for me. That's something I live by. And, it's like someone's like, well, if someone gave me $2 billion, and it's like, it doesn't matter. I still wouldn't go back. It's just, completely wrong. And at the end of the day, a gold medal at a competition is not worth that. And it's just, I definitely think what I've been through, though, I mean, because that was probably the worst thing I've ever been, was getting through, and it wasn't so much surviving my suicide attempt. It was the attempt of trying to get sober, like the withdrawal. The withdrawal was probably the hardest part of getting sober, right? So I don't know if a lot of people know that, but alcohol is probably the only one drug that you can die from, basically, besides benzos. So that was probably the toughest part. So,
Well, we're very lucky you did. Your story is so inspiring from start to finish. It really is. It's an amazing story, and you wear it lightly, but it's your courage and your integrity. It's something. If only there was more of you. If only we could clone you.
well, that would be great.
Can you tell us about your apparel line? Because I'm reading Bodies Play Sports, Not Identities. I think that's a very clever line. Tell us a little bit about what message you're trying to put out with this apparel.
Yeah, so I started my apparel line last year. It's just a very simple little company I started, just so people. It's not like a money making thing. It's all like really good quality because I want it to be cozy and stuff. But so any kind of message. So I have my Keep Female Sports Female with the 2 X's. And I have the Bodies Compete, which is very important because we know that bodies play sports, not identities. And I think all my messaging on my t-shirts and my hoodies is all like very respectful. So, and I actually get a lot of people. So my Keep Female Sports Female is really great because you could actually wear it and people would be like, they get the message, but then you could wear it where, you can't get in trouble because if someone says like something about transgender, you go, well, if you identify as a female, I guess you're included too. I've never had that happen, but anyways, and then I have everything's available in a mug and stickers and stuff like that. And it's really just about spreading the message. And I love it when people buy it and they send me selfies or they wear it to a sporting event. Like I wear it to the farmer's market. Like I try to wear it to the locust places. And honestly, because I kind of want to get a rise out of people, and it just doesn't work. People actually get me high fives and thumbs up, and I'm just like, and I go to the art district and I get high fives, and I'm like, you guys love it. So I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I wore it to BC when I went down to the legislation buildings, and even in British Columbia, people like I pack of high school kids go, where can I buy this? So I'm like, the young and the old were loving it. So I was like, okay.
Wow.
It goes to show average people do not buy into all of this, like really extreme stuff.
Yeah. So, and then we came out with my XX hat. This was after the boxing. So I was actually in talks with the Turkish boxer that went against the Ling boxer. I'm going to send her a couple of t-shirts. She was funny. She actually wrote, she doesn't speak much English, the one from Turkey. Mm-hmm. And she goes, I just fought a man. That's all she wrote to me on Instagram.
Yeah.
But this was after the fact. And I said, yes, you did. Yes, you did. You just fought a man. Because I was very vocal. I was on TV like every other day with reporters about the whole boxing thing. So I was like, I need to make a hat. I want to use just the X's, right? So I'm going to send her a bunch of apparel just because, God, the poor girl. So, but I'm selling these. I'm going to sell some toques for the winter time with the X's on it. Yeah, so that's all I sell. I think things are dwindling though. I don't really sell that many, so I might just start doing. It's not like the States, right? People don't really buy that much here in Canada, so
Well, maybe after this podcast, you will totally get a huge number of orders for your hats and shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question on behalf of my strength coach, who I
Yay,
told him,
here comes the
we're going
best
to
bit.
be interviewing April. So do you have any questions for her? So I don't know if we'll get to both of them, but he said it was really cool that we were talking to you. And he asked, how did the sport or industry change since the time you've been involved in it? Because like you've been lifting for quite some time now. I mean, around COVID is not that long, but you know, for some years, how has it changed, like in general, and maybe for women specifically?
Well, I mean, the only way it's changed for women, well, you tell, is it a male?
Yeah.
Well, so I've been trying, so I quit obviously, but what I wanted to change for the women was, it didn't really change that much, except for they did change it in my sport that they took away the arching for bench. So you can't do the crazy arching anymore, which is great because that was crazy and I couldn't even do that. And I do know they're trying to get it into the Olympics, but there's going to be a whole slew of things that they're going to have to change in order, because powerlifting is one of the sports that you don't actually move your feet. And that is why it won't be going into the Olympics. So unless they change a few little things, but I was
Can you
so
explain
grateful.
to the audience, why is the arch something beneficial for competitors? Can explain that a little bit for people who don't get it.
So what a lot of people, so powerlifting, for all those people out there that don't know, especially the men. So my bench press, when I say my bench press is like, say, 220, that is actually a very, very good bench press, especially for a 5'10", 48-year-old woman, because I have long limbs. But I think what people don't understand is in powerlifting, especially competing, we have to pause that weight on our chest for 2 seconds. So we're not just bouncing it off our chest like gym bros do in the gym. Because a lot of guys will come out to me, they'll hear my deadlift. I'm like, oh, my deadlift's like 5'10". Oh, they're like, whoa. But then they're like, oh, but what's your bench press? Because I can bench press 405. And I was like, oh, okay, but can you pause that on your chest? Because as soon as you say, we pause it on our chest, that takes like so much off their bench press, right? It's a world of difference.
Maybe what we'll do while we're in this segment, we'll put up a video in YouTube of just like, what does a bench press look like? Maybe we'll put one of your benching videos. Like the bench press is like a person is laying on their back, they're holding a barbell, kind of like hovering above their chest area, and they're bringing it down to their chest and pushing it back up. That is a bench press. And you have to pause here without creating the bounce and momentum in order for it to count. So when you have a massive arch, what that means is your chest is way closer to your arms in the bar in the extended position.
Oh, it's like
so you don't have to bring it. Yeah.
So you only have to bring it. So me, I have no arch. I am not flexible. I have no arch. I'm so flat. So my long arms have to go all the way down. So it's crazy. Like, so I don't know if you guys saw my before and after picture of when I was big.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, I lost 40 pounds. So the one bad thing about being in a high weight class, which is, I'll talk in pounds. So the top weight class for women is 185 pounds plus. So I was competing. I weighed 232 pounds, but that was still pretty low. I was competing against women that were 300 pounds. Like, there was a girl, no word of a lie, that was 400 pounds. And I was like, what? Yeah, no joke. And I literally, my coaches were constantly like, just keep eating, just eat. And I literally got so
That's insane.
And so I didn't realize how heavy I was getting. But in the top weight class, you can get so unhealthy. Even the men, you get so big. So I was so, my joints were inflamed. I was in pain a lot of the time. My knees, like I was just in so much pain. So I actually decided to lose weight, and I was going to go into a lower weight class, into the 84 minus kilograms, like 185 below. But then I was like, well, I'm going to have to do a water cut if I do go back. But then I was like, I'm just going to quit. And that's when I was like, well, I'm just going to lose a lot of weight and I'm going to get into boxing. So
watch out, boxing.
I know, watch out.
Oh, there's men in boxing, but I don't. I'm just gonna boycott. I would never box a male. Not that stupid. No way.
I wanted to ask you about something really quick that you touched on before that I think is so interesting. And then for all of our main audience, April is going to analyze my deadlift. So that's happening in an extended conversation. But
I'm very excited about this.
You mentioned something that I think is so important. When you allow males into this female sport, women who are competing are going to have to compensate somehow. So you talked about how this is going to pressure females to take performance enhancing drugs. It's going to pressure them into trying to get out of the weight class of the male lifter. So by either losing weight very rapidly or, probably not gaining weight, but maybe losing weight. So can you just talk about that for 1 minute and then we'll maybe shift over? Because I think people don't realize when an athlete wants to win, they will try to find a way around this unfair loophole in the regulations. And it could be very unhealthy, obviously, for the female athletes. Can you just touch on that?
Yeah, well, especially for females, right? Like, females already have like a huge, the highest rate of, here we go with body dysphoria and eating disorders, right? So that's going to put more pressure on women to either lose weight. So then you're going to have, eating disorders. You're going to have either anorexia, bulimia, stuff like that, PEDs, which are performance enhancing drugs, which AKA is cheating, right? And then we go back into integrity. And then, and if someone gets caught, then you're banned for like 2 years or more. So, and then you have depression. Like I said, a lot of athletes do have higher rates of suicide, right? A gold medal at Worlds is a lot. So it's again, an overtraining, right? I only trained like 3 or 4 times a week, and that was enough for me. I would suggest any more than that. But some girls I knew were just going in 6 times, 7 times. Like, it was crazy. So, it does take a toll on your body and your joints. So, yeah, definitely a lot of mental and physical harms.
Yeah. Well, April, we're so glad we got to talk to you. We'll definitely include links to, your website. I suppose it's a website. Where else do you want us to send people to check you out?
Yeah, I think the main website is my name, www.aprilhutchinson.com. That's where you can find my shop for all my apparel. Then you can see all my media interviews. I actually have an auction going on. I'm auctioning off my Team Canada tracksuit, autographs, because I'm raising money for my rehab facility that I went to where I got sober. So it's on until December. I didn't do it until Christmas time because I thought, I just want to raise money for Westover because I just want to give back to them because it's my 5-year sobriety. I thought, I want all the money to go to them because it's just a little farmhouse out in the country. And it's like it started there. Some a nun actually started it to help people. And then it just grew and grew by donations. It's a beautiful spot. And, you talk about, the NDP government who's doing this safe supply, which does not work. And then you have Pierre saying, look, we need money into rehab and recovery. That's what helps people, because people being loving and being compassionate and putting me into rehab, that's what helped me. And look, I'm alive today. So I'm so grateful for Westover Treatment Center and people that gave me a chance and just, helped. Sorry, I was crying. Sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, April.
Really helped. So I just, I know people talk about tough love, but I'm telling you, people that believe in you and actually have faith in you and just give you a hug and say, you know what, you can get better. That's what helps. And rehab really helped me. So
That's really beautiful, because we hear stories, people say, oh, I was in recovery, I was in rehab, but you don't really understand how deeply profound that was and how it touched their lives. I'm so glad that you shared that. And that's so cool that you're donating that money for your 5-year sobriety to them. That's awesome.
yeah, and if anyone out there knows anyone, just, you know, get them in contact with me. Like I love helping people. Like I'm here to listen to anyone. I can give advice, and like if you know anyone that's struggling, just get them to an AA meeting, or just, you know, get them some help at a rehab center for sure. So
Thank you. Thanks for joining us this week on Gender, a Wider Lens.
If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
And be sure to visit us on Substack by going to widerlenspod.com. There you can join our listener community, access bonus content and resources, plus learn about additional ways to support the show.
Our discussions are for educational purposes and are not intended as a substitute for mental health services.